I was introduced to Liberty House over 10 years ago when I was invited on a tour. The executive director at the time knew I had an interest in child abuse, as I had helped start the program for the Child Advocacy Center in Coos Bay before I relocated to Salem. A few years later, I was offered to join the staff at Liberty House, and I decided that after 14 years practicing in general pediatrics, I was ready to be dedicated to child abuse medicine full-time, and I joined the staff at Liberty House. 3.5 years later, I became the medical director. And like you, I am committed to changing our community one family at a time, one child at a time, by taking a stand against child abuse. Now I'm going to ask you to take a journey with me away from this beautiful room with all this conversation and laughter. And I'm going to ask you to step into your worst nightmare about a child who means the world to you. I'm going to ask you to join Joan in her life as her 6-year-old precious daughter Taylor just blurted it out in the middle of the afternoon, this secret she had been keeping for so long, that a trusted family friend had been taking advantage of her and had been touching her inappropriately. And with every word that Taylor told to Joan, it was like a knife in her heart, and she felt her head swimming. She felt like she was paralyzed. But Joan found the courage, and she picked up her phone, and she called 911. And when the police came, they talked briefly with Joan and Taylor, and they told them about this place that had been built specifically for crises like these. It was called Liberty House. And Joan was to expect a call from them to schedule an appointment for Taylor to be evaluated. So that day, Joan tried to put a smile on her face and act like nothing had happened. And that night after she put Taylor to bed, that was when the real torture started. As Joan only had the sounds of voices in her head that was saying, "How could this happen to my little girl? I'm her mother. Like, what kind of mother am I that this could happen in my house?" So it was hard for her to eat. She couldn't sleep. But a couple days later, a phone call came. And at first, when she heard it was Liberty House, Joan had a sense of tenseness in her throat, and her voice became high-pitched, and her heart began thundering in her ears. But the calm voice on the other end of the line was Chelsea, and she introduced herself as someone from the intake office who was also a family support specialist. And she was there to answer every question that Joan had about Taylor's evaluation coming up in a couple of days. And at first, Joan's head was swimming, but as Chelsea's warm, calm voice washed over her, she began to let go of just a little bit of that anxiety. So a couple days later, as they pulled up into the Liberty House parking lot, Taylor could hardly wait to get out of the car and check out all the beautiful flowers in the garden up close. Although Joan, again, felt that sense of paralysis, but she forced herself to get out of the car, and she held Taylor's hand as they walked into the entrance of Liberty House together, and they were greeted by the warm smiles of Jessie and Liz at the front desk, and were immediately ushered into their very own private waiting room, full of toys and games, there to keep Taylor busy. Taylor even had her very own volunteer who was there to hang out with her when the adults were meeting. And then, a few minutes later, a gentle knock at the door. And although Joan had never seen this woman before, as their gaze met, she felt a connection. And then she heard that familiar voice. It was Chelsea from a phone call a couple days before. And immediately, Joan felt like she had a lifeline in this unfamiliar place. A couple minutes later, I walked in the room with Meredy, one of our forensic interviewers. And Taylor, when we walked in, kind of was startled and hid behind Joan. We didn't bother. We weren't worried about that. We just sat down on the floor at Taylor's level, and we just gave her some space. And then we began inviting her to join our conversation as we told her a little bit about Liberty House. that this was a place built specifically for children. And while she was there, she was the boss. We would listen to her, and she wouldn't have to do anything she didn't want to do. Joan finally began to think, maybe it's going to be okay, as she saw Taylor peek around and give us a little giggle. Next was the grand tour. So we took them on a tour of the spaces and showed her all the cool equipment and how her words were so important. There was a policeman down the hall who wanted to see and hear her, all the way down in the listening room. And then when we showed her the exam room, we said, when kids are here, we don't have any shots. We don't have pokes or owies. Nothing here at Liberty House should hurt. So when it was time for Taylor's evaluation, she stood up and bravely followed the interviewer down the hall, chin held high. And Chelsea came in and met with Joan. And a quick hour went by while Taylor was talking with the interviewer and doing her checkup all on her own. And at the end of the hour, Taylor comes bounding back into that waiting room, wrapped her arms around her mom's neck and said, "Mommy, I did it. I told them what happened." And Joan thought, maybe my little girl is going to be okay after all. And that very same day, Chelsea connected them with a counselor at Hope and Wellness, which is our mental health services program. And over the coming months, Joan also joined the parent support group, and she learned that she wasn't alone in her struggles. There were other parents out there dealing with the same situation she was. And as the months went by, Joan began to recognize that she wasn't the cause of that abuse and that her daughter never blamed her. Actually, every child who suffers abuse and trauma, they need just one person, one trusting, secure adult in their lives to help them heal. And for Taylor, that person was hands down her mom, Joan. And when Joan recognized this, she was finally able to let go of that anxiety and fear every time Taylor was out of her vision. And she was actually able to trust herself again as a parent. And now Taylor, she found that spark, that light, her courage and power that other person tried to steal from her, she got it back. And she once again fueled that fire that could light a room with her smile and laughter. That is the healing power of Liberty House. So when I started working at Liberty House 7 years ago, we had one program. We evaluated children for abuse and neglect. 3 years ago, we added mental health services to help families heal from the trauma, abuse, and grief. And then last year, we added a prevention program and have already trained thousands of individuals in our community to recognize and intervene when they see abuse. That's triple the amount of programs we started. And in that same time, we have tripled the amount of staff that work at Liberty House, and we have tripled the number of children we're evaluating, and still, we can't keep up with the numbers of children out there that need our services. Imagine a future when Liberty House can say yes to every child, every family out there that needs us. Tonight, everyone in this room, each one of you has the power to make that happen. So can you tap into your courage? If you came here tonight thinking that there's a certain amount of money that you feel comfortable donating, could you find the bravery that Taylor did when she told her story, and could you consider tripling that? If everyone in this room decided to make a courageous stand against child abuse and neglect and gave bravely, imagine the input this one night would have on the children that make up the future of our community.